see what happens. I do think we should call Falcon, tell them we're leaving, 24 hours. I can ask them, say,
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to bring back to our stage to answer your questions and to talk about his fascinating life. Please welcome Mark Twain, otherwise known as Samuel Clemens.
Good afternoon. I hope you brought some questions with you. Otherwise, it's going to be a quiet afternoon. I'm Samuel Clemens. You may know me as Mark Twain. A little bit about myself. Question often I am asked is, when were you born? That would be November 30th, 1835. Now, if you were here the other night, Wednesday, you know that I like to set things out on a timeline so I can keep track of the dates. Now, for where I stand, Hallie's comments over yonder, so 1835 is here, the other comments over there, 1910, and everything else is kind of sandwiched in the middle there. Now, another question I'm often asked is about my name, Mark Twain. You may have heard that that is Leadsman's call, or 2 fathoms. You're entering safe waters, depending on which direction you're sailing. You might believe in safe waters. But a little known fact is that a gentleman named Captain Isaiah Sellers used the name before I did. Now, Captain Sellers did some writing as well for some publications, and he was a bit famous for being loquacious and including every single detail and every hair on every head in every person that he mentioned in his writings. And I lampooned him, or what we call burlesqued him, in a piece that friends of mine had published. And he felt so bad about it and embarrassed by it that, well, he stopped writing. And out of a little bit of guilt, I suppose, I wanted to honor him by using his name when he passed away. So in 1863, February of that year, I was writing for the Virginia City Territorial Enterprise over in Nevada. And I signed the piece Mark Twain out of honor to Mr. Sellers. There's 2 questions for you. I hope that got you started. Anything else? Oh, we were in Elmira from the time I got married in 1870, February 2nd of that year. And we had our house started in Hartford, built in 1871. We moved there, and I believe we rented a place in 1871 near the Nook Farm. And then the house that you may know in Hartford was completed, and we moved in 1874. So was that too convoluted, or did I answer your question?
How long is that?
12 feet. Yes, sir.
Could you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for Huckleberry Finn?
I've never heard of that book. No, certainly I can. Of course I can. Well, as you may know, that was the book that followed Tom Sawyer. Original title was Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, not E, just Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, in parentheses, Tom Sawyer's Comrade. Now, Tom Sawyer, of course, was based upon mostly myself and a couple of other friends. But Huckleberry Finn was, first of all, the word Huckleberry means someone inconsequential. Now, Tom Blankenship was a good friend of ours in the town, and he and his brother, Benson actually combined to provide me with the inspiration for Huckleberry. I needed a venue, a way of telling the story that was different from Tom Sawyer. And I thought, if I had Huckleberry Finn narrate the story himself, that might be the trick that I needed. Well, I had no idea the can I was opening. That boy took off with that book, and I had to follow and run behind him with a pen to keep up with him. But it almost sort of wrote itself. It was autobiographical in many ways, but Tom Blankenship provided me with most of that. He was very much like Huckleberry Finn. Very good-hearted boy. As good a heart as any boy ever had. Yes, sir.
You went Broadway. Tell us how you went Broadway. How you made that.
Oh, how I love to tell that story. The embarrassing things, what I love to talk about the most. Well, I had no knack for business. That's how I went broke. One of the worst occasions for that was my investing in the Page Compositor, a gentleman by the name of James Page. I had the great misfortune of seeing his elaborate machine. It was a typesetting machine, and he built used the Colt firearms factory in order to put it together. It had 18,000 moving parts, and I'm probably bringing the number down. But I had the great misfortune of seeing that contraption work once. I was probably the only one who saw it work, and as a result of that, I thought it was going to be the innovation that would change the face of typesetting forever, and I could not have been more wrong. That was probably the biggest loss of money. I kept throwing it into the furnace, as I was saying last Wednesday. And the other way I managed to lose a lot of money and get it back to a certain degree was with the publishing company, Charles L. Webster Publishing, which was named for my nephew by marriage. When we published Huckleberry Finn in 1885, first it was published in London in 84, then in 85 we let it go here in America, and that brought in, that was our inaugural publication for that company. But it really was the memoirs of General Grant that brought in the most money. However, General Grant died that same year, almost destitute, and his widow was in a sorry way. Allowed that she should have most of the profits from that book, and I was very honored to give her a check for $200,000 at the end of that year. But to be honest with you, sir, from that point on, when the publishing company went bankrupt, I never really recovered from it. So if you have $5, I'd appreciate it.
Weren't you the neighbor of Harriet Beecher Stowe?
I beg your pardon?
Weren't you the neighbor of Harriet Beecher Stowe?
Yes, sir. Yes.
What's
Good.
she like?
A very good friend, a lovely lady. I also knew her brothers, Henry Ward Beecher and Thomas Beecher, who actually was a minister who officiated at Libby in my wedding with Joe Twitchell. Both of them officiated at the wedding. Very, very kind people, very generous. Very generous, just as much as she seems through her writings. It's as sincere and genuine as you can imagine. Also a lovely, lovely home. Have you been there?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I wouldn't call it a religious persuasion, but you know my background was Presbyterian, and I had questions when I was younger. At first, of course, you believe what you're told when you're a child, and the beliefs of Mr. Knox and Mr. Calvin get ingrained very deeply. But one of the examples that I found was when a boy we had a couple of boys in our town that drowned. One of them was Clint Levering, and the other was a boy we knew was Dutchie, from the German family. Now Dutchie, he recited Bible verses. I believe he recited at one time 1,000 Bible verses exactly correctly. And Clint Lettering was a rascallion, he was a thief, he was a liar, and frankly nobody was surprised when he fell in the river and drowned. But when Dutchie made the same fate just a few weeks later, well, then I began to wonder, what is the same punishment going for a good boy and for a sinner? But it wasn't until the loss of my brother Henry in 1858 that I really doubted that there was any sort of hand guiding us at all. Not that I'm an atheist, mind you, but I find if I had one thing in common with my father, which is there are few things, it's that deism, I suppose, that once the boulder is set in motion by the Almighty, He lets it go. And if it hits the Cooper shop like you planned, well, that's fine. You agree with that story. Yes. So I have been curious all my life, and I've even dabbled in metaphysics and mental healing, in spite of my relationship with Mrs. Eddy. But I found that finding my own path and asking my own questions gave me more satisfaction than following any particular organized religion. But it was Presbyterian that started me out. My mother was a very strong Presbyterian. Once we moved to Hannibal, she and Camila, my sister, joined the Presbyterian Church in 1841, 2 years after we got there. Yes, sir.
Many places travel to lecture, and how many continents?
How many places did I travel to lecture? Well, you'll find most of those are following the equator. That's probably the most serious book that...
What was the question?
Oh, I beg your pardon. How many places have I been to lecture, and how many continents have I visited? I don't know that I can give you the figure of how many places I have lectured. It really started in San Francisco after my visit to the Sandwich Islands, and it proved to be a savior when it came to my money troubles. My big mouth has saved me and got me into more trouble than I can count. But I really don't know that number. Yes, sir. I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. The sale of the books. That it was the royalties from the books. That's how we were able to write that check. Is that your question? It was royalties, and it was royalties that she was due. Now, because we were the publishers, we were also able to decide and negotiate what that percentage would be, and I think it was close to 75% for her.
What's your educational endeavors?
You know, I was not too fond of school. But I can't say that I learned certainly on the road and by asking questions and meeting people. In terms of educational, I don't have formal education. Although Yale did give me a degree course in 1889.
Was it an honorary degree?
Yes, sir. Yeah. In fact, I debated whether or not I should wear the gown, the graduation gown. You may have seen pictures of me. It's same with Tom Sawyer. It was a strategy to protect the copyrights, especially in England at that time. And there were things of mine, works of mine being published in Canada that we had no control over. They were what you might call bootlegs now. But that was the point, was for international copyrights. I went to addressed the Senate to talk about the international copyrights in 1886. And in fact, in order to attract attention, wore this suit and little accessories. Oh, sorry. And then it sort of caught on. That was in January of that year, so of course this was scandalous.
What did you think of Europe when you were there?
Oh, you know, I went to write a sort of a burlesque of it. I thought I was gonna take a little fun at their cost, but yeah, I was so impressed with what I found, and the same with when I visited England, that I really had to turn the writing the other way and be more supportive and complimentary to them. But it was really, there was an education, great education. It was going to Europe and learning languages as well. Don't ask me to speak anyhow. Yes, ma'am.
Question.
Where did I meet Livy, my wife? Olivia Langdon met her brother first on Quaker City in 1867. We were going to the Mediterranean and the Holy Land, and I was preparing to write my first feature book, long book, Innocents Broad. And her brother, Charlie Langdon, showed me a locket. I first saw her in a miniature form, and I fell in love immediately. I knew that was the girl for me. And I was finally able to meet her in 1868, and I proposed to her for almost first thing, because I'd known her so long from this little picture, you know. And she refused me for almost a whole year. Then she finally said yes. Yes, and so in a strange way, I met her when she wasn't even there, in Quaker City. Yes, sir.
Jumping from Calaveras County.
Yes,
How
sir.
did you come to write that?
Well, it was a story I heard on the Jackass Mountain with Steve Gillis and I forget the name of the fellow we heard telling that tale. But it was a well-known old tale, and there were a number of different versions of it. And it's what they call the version I did was what they call a frame story. I knew a gentleman who once had a friend who had the experience, and he was once told so that you could sort of back your way out of it and not be involved in any criminal activity. But that was it. It was when we went to, when we were Oregon and I were on the West Coast and traveled from San Francisco over to Calaveras County, which you just know of, Calaveras County. Yes.
I visited your house in Hartford several times. How did you like living in Hartford?
Oh, we loved it. Very expensive, but we loved it. It was built, you know, Livy did much of the design of that house. We hoped it had sort of a feel of a steamboat, but we loved that place, and it was a shame to have to leave it. We closed it up and went to Europe, as a matter of fact, in 1891, and had planned to come back. In fact, we had every intention of living there again. But while we were gone on that trip in '96, my oldest daughter, Susie, passed away. And we simply couldn't find the strength to live there again.
How long were you there in Hartford?
At that house,
Yes.
from 1874 to 1891. This feels like a history quiz. 17 years, I suppose that is. Yes, sir.
How well did you know General Grant?
I did not meet General Lee. I knew General Grant well once we had met. It wasn't too much before we published his book. We approached him to see if we could get his memoirs written, so that would be probably 1884. Yes, in back here.
I heard you don't particularly like Congress. What's the problem with the House of Representatives and the Senate?
Well, as I've said, imagine that you're an idiot. And imagine you're a member of Congress. But I repeat myself. They're a great place to hang some very nice clothing, but other than that, they don't get much done, in my opinion. Yes, in the blue?
What can you tell us about your early life?
Oh, much more than I can tell you about my later life. Let's see. As I say, I was born in 1835. We moved to Hannibal in 1839. However, just before that, my Sister Margaret died of the yellow fever in that year. And sadly, before that, we lost Brother Benjamin. Just after that, in 1842, Brother Benjamin also succumbed to yellow fever. And we had one older brother named Pleasantham, who was born in 1828 and didn't last out the year. The sixth of 7 children. But after we moved to Hannibal in 1839, I went to what they call a dame school. Had a teacher by the name of Miss Mary Ann Newcomb, who was the inspiration for Miss Watson. In that same year, Tom Nash was born, and H.H. Rogers was also born. There was a tornado that touched down in Natchez, Mississippi, in that year. And following that, in 42, after Ben died, my brother Orion took off for St. Louis. That's when he started to become a printer, trained as a printer. As I recall, there was a solar eclipse that year. University of Notre Dame was founded. P.T. Barnum displayed a 25-inch tall gentleman by the name of Tom Thumb, and I used the term gentleman loosely because he was a 4-year-old boy. But anything to make a dollar, right, Mr. Barnum? Let's see, what else can I tell you about 42? It's the most interesting things. At 43, I spent a lot of time at my Uncle Quarles' farm. I believe it was probably my mother's idea to protect me from the yellow fever. But it was one of the most enjoyable summers of my life. And in 1844 is when we moved into the Hill House, or Hill Street House in Hampton, that many people relate as being my childhood home, although we were only there from 1844 to 1853. I had apprenticed as a printer during that time. My father died in 47. There was a terrible measles epidemic in 1845 that just worried every mother in that town. And my mother, of course, was no exception. She was deathly afraid for my brother Henry and Pamela and me. And frankly, I don't remember if I was afraid of the measles or not, but I do know I could not take the suspense any longer. And I went over to my friend Will Bowen's house, who had the measles, and I crawled into bed with him, hoping to bring it on and just get it over with. But sadly, I came up against death's door, and they brought me back, but that was one of the best times I ever died, as I like to say. However, I attribute that experience as to why I became a writer. Because of that experience, my mother was so exhausted with trying to keep track of me and my bad habits and get me back to going to school, that she had me apprenticed to Mr. Lacazette at the Hannibal Gazette. And from there, I had started a career as a printer and a typesetter. In 47, let's see, my father died. That's the year that's the year Jane Eyre came out. And Thomas Edison was born that year, as I recall. But in 1848,